Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Donadio. I work in the Bureau of Accounting Operations and I'm in the cash management unit. So we're going to discuss opening a new bank account. Um, what we have here is the guide to financial operations. It's a fantastic tool. It covers many of our tasks and procedures that are followed in order to get things done in the accounting system and in the state's finances. But we're going to specifically talk about the establishing and closing of bank accounts and I guess I'll just read from the GFO. Um, it's the agency's responsibility to establish a bank account. Each agency must obtain authorization from OSC Accounting Operations and specifically cash management again for to establish new bank accounts through request in writing. Upon receipt of that formal request, OSC will evaluate the request to determine if the establishment of the account is consistent with all the rules, regulations, and statutes to determine overall financial operation of the requesting agency. Each request must be approved by the CFO of the requesting agency or by a designee. And there below there is a list of all the things that are required to open an account. I can say this. I can say these requests will be scrutinized. Um, my colleague further in on the presentation will discuss the reasons why there is an initiative to reduce the number of bank accounts, but again, we'll get into that a little later in the presentation. The reason for this request is OSC, specifically the cash management unit, is responsible for oversight of all banking services related to the funds of the state. We, the Comptroller's Office, must approve any bank account, and the reason for that is no bank account containing state monies may be charged any account or service fees. That particular bullet is in reference to we send out RFPs for contracts to do business with all the major banks and even local banks. It's pretty obvious that the state as a whole has quite a bit more clout than an agency itself, and our unit deals with those RFPs on a rolling basis as they come to expire and as we renew them. But we ask that if anything occurs, if any service charges are being charged to your account that you've never seen before, that you contact us immediately so we can address it. And to follow up with that, OSC generally pays for ordinary and routine banking services for state agencies. And, as I was saying earlier, we, with such a large volume of transactions, we could get a better rate as far as, any service that's provided, a wire or any type of banking transaction. So over the years or over time, it's been assessed, and it's our role in the state of New York to oversee all the banking services charges and opening of bank accounts for the state of New York. Next slide, please. So you may need to contact us for any questions or opening of bank accounts, but any other questions regarding service fees or just general questions about your banking activity, You can contact us at the banking services website, which is bankingservices@osc.ny.gov. We would prefer that you contact us rather than just go ahead and making decisions on bank accounts. Therefore, we can be proactive in solving problems rather than going back and undoing something. So I appreciate everyone's time, and I will now hand it over to my associate, Erky Ullman.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. My name is Erky Ullman. I work in the Bureau of State Accounting Operations and in the cash management unit, and I'm a supervisor there. I will be talking about the future of bank accounts. And while I'm discussing this, I'd ask the participants to kind of keep in mind how the information I'm giving you might be able to help your agency. We really hope that we can provide some useful information that will help you improve your processes at your respective jobs. So that said, our overarching goal here is to improve the efficiency of statewide banking services. And to give you a little background, we began this project back in about 2017 to consolidate the number of bank accounts that are out in the state's name because we are assessed fees on those bank accounts. So we began to reach out to agencies and get a sense of what their banking requirements and needs were. And once we got some background information, we began addressing some of the things associated with bank accounts that would generate fees that were no longer necessary. One of the first places that we went was stopping paper statements. This being 2021, I don't know how many of you listening receive paper statements in the mail because, as you know, you can log on to your bank's website or even through an app and get your statements. So there really wasn't a need to keep mailing out statements and getting and having fees associated with those. So that is one thing that we did stop right at the beginning of this project. So as Mike had mentioned, we are looking to consolidate and close bank accounts. And there could be any number of reasons for that. There could be overlap. Perhaps you have multiple accounts at your agency or in your area that have similar functions, but are perhaps redundant to a certain extent. If that is the case, then I would say that would be a good area to look at to see what are your banking functions? What do you need to accomplish with your bank accounts? And can it be done with less number of open accounts? And that, again, would mean less fees at the end of the day. We also have found instances where we have stale or dormant accounts at the banks. Stale accounts are perhaps accounts that were used at one point but are no longer being used. Perhaps they were even forgotten about. Dormant accounts, on the other hand, have not had any activity in some time, and the bank has recognized that and has kind of put it on mute, if you will. So, of course, we would want to, if those accounts are not being used, we would want to close those accounts, again, for the same reasons. And also necessity. A lot of these bank accounts were set up decades ago, if I'm to be frank. And a lot has changed in 20, 30 years. Banking processes have evolved, technology has evolved. So there may be a better way of doing things that perhaps the bank accounts that you have may be inefficient in accomplishing that task. And there might be better ways for your agency to go about your banking tasks and free up some time. The next thing I wanted to touch upon was automating processes as one of the ways to improve the efficiency of your banking activity. And I'm going to be very general about this. Oftentimes, there are multiple steps that must be gone through, whether it be by the agency or here at OFC, to get revenues from the point of collection into the state's general checking. That, of course, a lot of non-value added steps is inefficient. And we would like to perhaps find a more direct way to get those funds to where they need to be without taking the scenic route, if you will. If you are interested in learning more about this, because every agency is different, every agency has its own needs, and solutions would have to be arrived at mutually, I would encourage you to reach out to us, and our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. Next, I would like to talk about reducing banking service costs for accounts already in existence. As I mentioned at the top of my speech here, one of the first things that we did back in 2017, 2018 was stopping paper statements. Even though you're going to be keeping those accounts open, it just was not necessary to incur the fee for paper statements. Likewise, there are other ways to reduce fees associated with your accounts that you are actively using. I do want to touch upon a point here, just for illustration. A fee that you might incur is when you bring a deposit of cash or checks to the bank and deposit it with a teller. That is actually quite expensive to the state to do teller deposits. So our preferred, what we would prefer to have happen is to have the deposits dropped off, whether it be an overnight drop box, something of that nature. It is much less expensive, and it will improve. Something like that will improve your process. We also sometimes find that there are services associated with these bank accounts that perhaps at one time were needed but are no longer. We know that lock boxes are being used by many agencies. Some agencies use couriers to transfer cash, checks, that sort of thing from the agency location to a bank depository. Those, again, all carry fees associated with it. Generally speaking, anything that involves interaction with a human being is going to cost more to the state. So that's why we would encourage you to log on to your banking websites if you do have an issue and see if it can't be remedied electronically on your own before calling the bank's customer service or anything like that. And I'll drop another illustration here. Let's just say you need to place a stop payment on a check. If you call up the bank, and I'm going to use Bank of America as an example here, they will put that stop on for 12 months. And the fee that they assess to the state will be a lot higher than if it was done online. And also the added benefit of doing it online is that the stop is in place for 36 months. So again, this is another instance where we would encourage the use of online resources to accomplish your day-to-day banking needs. Next, I would like to move on to reducing reconciliations. So many agencies, as I mentioned, have multiple bank accounts. Some of them may or may not have overlapping functions, which, as we discussed, could be consolidated. The idea of closing and consolidating bank accounts will free up staff time at the agency because you will not have as many bank accounts to reconcile on a daily basis. So that will be more time that you can dedicate to other duties and less time that you would need to spend doing these sort of activities that do not add a whole lot of value. Lastly, I would like to discuss bank activity through SFS. We are encouraging that bank accounts and that activity be routed through SFS. We know that many agencies have systems dedicated tracking financial information, and it would be a lot easier, frankly, for the agencies and for just transparency as a whole in the state to have that run through SFS. The monies in this case would be swept into our general checking account and would realize STIP earnings. And for those of you who are not familiar with our acronyms, STIP stands for the Short-Term Investment Pool. And what that is we basically invest that money and we receive a return on it that is going to be greater than, especially with interest rates being what they are today, is going to be greater than the interest that you would receive on a savings account, perhaps at your agency. We have had some success, quite a bit of success with with closing certain savings accounts at agencies and bringing those monies into the general checking and having them invested through STIP. That being said, I will leave a moment here for any questions anyone may have.
There are a few in the chat. Eric, can you see them or do you want me to give them to you?
Let's see, I can see it here. So we have a question. Do balances from dormant bank accounts get escheated to the Office of Unclaimed Funds? That is a good question. I believe we would have to recognize first that those bank accounts are dormant. So that's the first part of the process. We would then sweep the money out of that bank account to zero it out because we cannot close accounts with zero balances. As for the ultimate destination, I think that would depend on a case-by-case basis. As you know from working for the state, there are a lot of nuances. Perhaps we might be able to get a more thorough answer to that question later on, but I do appreciate that. We have another question. Are new bank account requests still required to be physically mailed as indicated in the GFO, or can it be emailed? You can email those to bankingservices@osc.ny.gov. We would encourage any staff at agencies to employ electronic resources over, physical mailings at any time, just in the same line of thought as taking care of your banking needs online as much as possible versus calling into call centers. We have another question here. If a state agency's name has changed, how does that agency go about changing the agency name on their bank account? Does OSC need to do this, or does the agency have the ability or authority to change the name with the banks? We would ask in that situation, again, that you reach out to banking services at osc.ny.gov, and we would be able to pick up the process from there. I have another question here. Can remote deposit be credited to the general checking account? I do not have an answer for that right now. That is a great question, and we might be able to circle back around. If there are any questions, I'm just going to add this as an aside, that are unanswered through this presentation today. We would ask that you reach out to us, and we would be able to answer your questions in more detail there. The last question I have is the online profile for our account doesn't appear to have the functionality to stop a payment. How do we get this changed / updated? And again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but that is a question that should be sent to the banking services email address, and we would be able to address these individual situations as they come up and get you the entitlements that you need to use these functions. So that said, I am going to turn things over to my colleague, Amanda Isabella. Amanda.
My name is Amanda Isabella, as Eric has mentioned. I am the supervising accountant in cash management. So I am going to pick up the presentation with sole custody accounts, which is our slide, page 7. So as we've talked about over the years, that bank accounts can be opened by agencies for revenue collection, cash advances, or any other authorized sole custody purposes that we've discussed over the years. Pursuant to Section 106 of the state finance law, this law requires that all monies be received by any state officer or persons receiving monies shall be deposited in a bank approved by the state comptroller. So if the account needs to be opened, it's paid through the banking services and the collateralization of accounts. So as we've talked about, OSC has been working with agencies to reduce unnecessary services and accounts as possible. And CMU has been working over the last 5 years with various agencies and has made great progress, as Eric and Mike have both talked about. So, however, if you do need to open a bank account, then you or someone from the agency will need to provide us, cash management, with the documentation on why you need to open a bank account. If the account needs to be opened, then agencies need to make sure that they are not requesting items unnecessarily from the bank. So, a little preview to that. So now we're going to talk about 2 types of sole custody accounts: statutorily created and administrative revenue accounts, collection accounts. So there are a lot of obvious differences. One is created by legislation, and the other is solely to collect money or revenue. If we talk about the statutorily created accounts, these are much more rigid in their function. Basically, the money comes in and the checks go out for purposes which are stated in law. The revenue account collection accounts are just that. They collect revenues only. No expenditures going out. Only monies going out of this account is to the state treasury or the general checking, and no checks are issued from the account for expenditures. So we've been talking with tax and finance about transitioning these depositing into general checking, which Eric was talking about before, or cash management can sweep the funds out of the accounts and bring them into the general checking. So we're trying to work on different logistics and eliminate extra steps for agency personnel to make things easier, just like Eric was talking about. So my next slide is page 8, and it continues, sole custody topics. So as we stated in our course description, there are a few areas we should discuss about sole custody. So let's get into the weeds a little bit more about check stock. So the first is check stock for new bank accounts. The question is, do you really need checks? Checks cost money, and if you don't need them, we don't need to order them, right? So as Erica was explaining, banking services costs are expensive for various items. So checks are only required for legitimate or statutorily created sole custody accounts where the items are paid for out of the account. Again, any revenue collection accounts do not need checks. So please don't order the checks. If your account is only receiving money, again, cash management can sweep the funds out of the account and bring it into the general checking versus mailing a check. I know it may sound a little bit logical, but it happens. We all get busy in our daily work. So we just wanted to make you aware of, checks and how they function. So as always, as we like to say, always reach out to somebody in cash management if you have a question about anything. So as we said, there's a list of our names, our emails, phone numbers that you can call us, email us, and we will certainly, if we don't know the answer right away, we will look into it. We will contact the bank and we will get back to you. And again, a lot of this information is in the GFO. So agencies can request checks on an account, but only if it's absolutely necessary. Checks are expensive and they cost the state money. So on to the next slide. Page 9, which is now banking legal agreements, or also known as banking service agreements. So this has been a topic for a while, but lately it's been growing among the big banks and the little small banks. So as the slide states, these agreements are formal, written agreements or contracts between the state of New York, which include agencies and the banks. So on the next slide, number 10, page 10, no agency personnel should be entering or signing these agreements with the banks, which means you don't need to go to a branch or bank or call a bank manager. You can call us. Call cash management staff, send the email, banking services, cash management, however it works for you. We would be happy to go over what you're looking for and how we can get them resolved with the bank. So these documents are very detailed and require legal review. They're they're contracts between the state and the bank. So most of all the banks that the state deals with already have banking service agreements, with which were agreed upon years ago. But right now we're working with a few large banks to go over them and update them. So cash management and OSC legal are reviewing the language of the agreements to make sure that it's OSC approved. So always reach out when you have to change services, or if there's something else you need, please reach out, because we need to make sure that it's in the agreement. So the next slide, which is page 11 on escheatment, is our final topic for our presentation. So we've included a snapshot of where the escheatment is located within the GFO. It's under the section 14 of special procedures and number 1, outstanding check outreach and escheatment. So if you're not familiar with the escheatment process, state finance law section 102 states that if any uncashed checks and prepaid cards issued by or on behalf of the state for more than 1 year from the date of issuance shall be paid into the abandoned property fund. The funds must be turned over to the Office of the Unclaimed Funds by April 30th. So agencies are responsible for transferring the funds from their sole custody accounts once the required information is transmitted to OUF. I think there's been some discussions about the timing of this, so we wanted to bring it up and give you the opportunity to go out to look at the financial operations, to also go out to the OUF website, which is on the slide, or in the GFO. And if you have additional questions, you can go there and look at all the detail. There's a handbook, the abandoned property law, as well as different e-learning and resources to understand the procedures. There's also a list to follow for the reporting process, as well as how to submit your report and payment. So we wanted to make you aware that the funds needed to be transferred from your agency sole custody account once the information has been sent to OUF. So on the final slide of page 12, so here's all of our contact information. Probably most of you have it, but it's always good to have it on a slide. So feel free to reach out to any one of us. We're here to help you with any questions. I'm going to say that this is the end of our presentation. Thank you for joining our cash management presentation today. We hope you had some information that will help you get through your day a little easier. Always reach out to us. We're here to help you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.